We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And welcome back to Liberty Nation's special Talking Liberty, where we examine the hot cases and how they impact you and your constitutional republic. As ever, we're joined by legal analyst and host of the excellent Uprising podcast, Mr. Scott D. Cosenza, Esquire. Welcome back, Scott.
Hi, Mark. Thank you.
So the first question I have to ask, Scott, is about New York Governor Kathy Hochul. She's declared that racism is a public health crisis. Now, what are the legal ramifications here, Scott? And is this as bizarre as it sounds?
Well, Mark, it's no mere executive level declaration. The state of New York has passed a law that says it's a crisis. So we're well beyond the simple, I declare this day, Apple Orchard Day, which I'm sure they have in New York, and I'm sure it's a fine day. But no, this is an actual state law that does it. It is, I think, a perfect encapsulation of the farce of the entire thing. If we just look at the law itself, which I have done, and for people taking notes at home, it's A05679 is the actual, that's the assembly bill that was passed into law. Now, Mark, the law establishes a commission basically to study and, things about race and receive data about race. It's hilarious because the appointments to the commission are the commissioner of health, their designee, and two appointees of theirs, or rather, and one appointee of theirs, and then two appointees of the governor, and then four from the legislature. But the funny thing is, the commissioner of health is appointed by the governor, and the governor gets to appoint, I think, one or two people directly. So almost all the appointments, at least 50%, if not,
I know what you're going to say here,
are wholly controlled by the governor, okay? But it's designed to act like they're not. And if you know how government works, is the assistant to the governor, who's the person who says how it is, picks up the phone of the commissioner of health and says, "Here's who you're appointing to this commissioner." So that's just one thing. It's just a vehicle for Kathy Hochul to say whatever she wants. But it doesn't stop there. That's just the beginning. The best part is that the law was passed and signed into law on December 22nd, 2021. Well, the only thing that the law sort of requires work-wise is that this commission produce a report. The report is supposed to occur biannually, so every other year. And the first report was due December 31st, 2021. All right, so let's get our math straight. The bill's signed into law December 22nd. The report's due December 31st, but here's the catch, Mark. At the last line of the legislation says this act shall take effect on the 30th day after it shall have become law. So it cannot take effect, Mark. Now, I'm licensed to practice law and not math, but I do think that it seems clear that 30 days past December 22nd is after December 31st. So the law
let's just figure that out, Scott.
Cannot exist.
Wait, hang on. So you add that, you carry the one, you subdivide by that, and it's it's nonsense. Right, I got you.
It's totally nonsense. There'll be a report required in 2 years. Now, these commissioners are not paid a salary, Mark, but they are entitled to reimbursement of expenses. So maybe they have to lease a car or an SUV to drive around the state and examine issues about race,
or a hotel room, or
perhaps
a
fly to Puerto Rico in the
Jamaica.
wintertime to listen to the stories of other marginalized communities. That's something I think we can expect to see a fair bit of if the past is our guide to the future in New York politics.
Okay, and I can't let you go without discussing the fallout from the Ghislaine Maxwell case. Now, a federal judge unsealed an agreement between Epstein and one of Epstein's accused, Virginia Giuffre, as soon as the verdict came down for Maxwell. Now, we have that agreement on the Liberty Nation website in full, but what's the short version?
Mark, I am fascinated by the claims that Virginia Roberts Giuffre, she used both last names, Virginia Roberts, sometimes Virginia Giuffre, and others. Because of the heinous nature of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes against these young women, some of the young women's claims that are seemingly false or altered or designed to punish have not been subject to kind of robust sort of fisking or examination or cross-examination, as the case may be. And that is what interests me, is the cross-examination. And by that I mean, I think that some of these Epstein claims were brought about as a way, it sort of dovetails into, and I got a little bit of a tinfoil hat on, half a hat maybe, which is that when, remember the full court press that went on against Donald Trump, whether or not there were, actual crimes to support it or not. And I think part of that zeal for Epstein was that Trump could be tied and linked to Epstein. And I just want to see where that goes. And Virginia Roberts, Virginia Giuffre is partly key to that because her allegations include politically motivated allegations, I believe. Her attorney was David Boyce, who's a Democrat operative lawyer type. And some of her claims have been openly sort of publicly refuted by Alan Dershowitz, who I regard very highly. And she has said that basically Epstein gave her to Dershowitz sexually. And that's been kind of, there are competing counterclaims of libel and slander from both of them to the other. And I think that for the first time in this coming trial or court cases that they have against each other, we're actually going to see in open court the evidence. And that's what this revelation of this settlement document provides, some sunshine and sunlight on the whole thing. The Ghislaine Maxwell trial was conducted basically almost entirely in secret. So we don't really understand what went on and why.
It's interesting that you mention Alan Dershowitz because the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC, as soon as the Maxwell verdict dropped, had on as an impartial analyst Alan Dershowitz, which, seeing as he's been accused of being alongside Jeffrey Epstein in some cases, they realized the day after, apparently. So somebody's probably getting fired at the BBC, but to have him on as an analyst in a case
he's
in
not
which he's
just accused. That's one thing. Like guys like Les Wexner, some pretty powerful people, former Senator Bill Mitchell, I think, and there's quite a few who apparently that it seems apparent that Ms. Roberts just either basically made up out of whole cloth. That's what it seems like. But I'll be interested to see what plays out in court. But Dershowitz, I was just going to say, is not just an alleged perp. What he has engaged openly, he has challenged Virginia Roberts and called her a liar and said that not only is she a liar, like there's not a mistake. He said he's never even met her. It's not like he said, well, there was like a small massage that wasn't sexual. No. He says, I've never met this person, much less engaged in inappropriate activity with them. And he has receipts to prove it, literal receipts of like where she says they were in, New York and he was in LA with a hotel receipt and cell phones and whatever. So the evidence there seems very interesting. And it's one of the reasons why, for people paying attention to the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, Mark, one of the kind of things that was questioned by a lot of people is why wasn't so-and-so brought to trial to testify, because their testimony was even more heinous or revealed more bad conduct from Maxwell. And the reason why Alan Dershowitz speculates is because then they would have to undergo cross-examination against their character and previous false statements, which is he says he's eager to do for Virginia Roberts. So and there's also, like, if you want to peel the onion layer, another layer, that lawyer that we talked about, David Boyce, he's been basically taken off the case and removed from her as being her lawyer so that he can testify, because Dershowitz wants to call him as a fact witness regarding her lies against him. So there's a lot there. I mean, it's one of these things where it will keep the real conspiracy theorists up for a generation to come, the kind of levels and layers that are involved in the case.
Well, we'll only be covering the real stuff on libertynation.com. Scott DiCosenza, thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Mark.
And that's it for this episode of Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I want to thank our guests, Tim Donner, Dave Patterson, Sarah Cowgill, and the uncaped constitutional crusader, Scott DiCosenza Esquire, for joining us. And of course, thanks to you, the faithful listeners, for tuning in each week. I appreciate you all. My final thoughts for this week. In a time that saw the Democrats paint almost half the country as extremists and will brook no division on that particular issue, it's perhaps time to take advice from one a little wiser than they. Coming back to William Butler Yeats, he wrote, quote, "Out of the quarrel with others, we make rhetoric. Out of the quarrel with ourselves, we make poetry, end quote. We spend so much of our efforts and our hearts on making arguments to persuade others or to express our points, often in anger. Maybe we need to be more independent. We can't convince everyone. We just need to be the truest form of ourselves. Lead and persuade by example. Forget the petty word games. Ignore the provocations so clearly designed to undo us. And focus on being the best version of ourselves. Now that's a powerful thing. That's poetry by any other name. And that's a quarrel worth having. Thanks for being here. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
Maybe tracking polls sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.